Hi, everybody. My name is Manolo Matos. I am the Kentucky leader of the Central and Western chapter, or the chapter in Kentucky, and I am here to present Jeff Wong. I'm super excited to be here. Jeff Wong, I had a chance of meeting him earlier. He was on my podcast, and we had a great conversation, and I know this presentation is going to be pretty amazing. He's a filmmaker, a storyteller, and coach. He's also an experienced project manager with a passion for environmental and social activism and impactful storytelling. With a proven track record working for a Fortune 500 strategy and social media growth, he's led forward-thinking documentary projects spotlighting environmental challenges and solutions of Paraguay, South America. And he also did an amazing documentary called Rostros del Rio that we will post a link to in the chat if anybody's interested in seeing this. So I'm not going to talk anymore. I'm going to let Jeff take over and tell us everything that he has to tell us today.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you so much, Manolo, for introducing me, and great to see you again. And I'm so happy to be here myself. I am extremely honored to be here to talk a little bit about my experiences here in Paraguay. I've been surrounded by so much diversity of culture, of environment, having traveled along the Paraguay River, have been been in the Pantanal, which is the biggest wetlands in the world. And there's extreme amounts of biodiversity. So I was able to see a lot of that here in Paraguay. I'm so excited to talk a little bit about my experiences today. As we go along, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to jump in and then type them out. Manolo, feel free to cut me off as we go and just kind of say, hey, we got a question. And then we'll be able to address those. I'd love to have this be as collaborative as possible of a conversation today. So without further ado, Manolo, just making sure everyone can see the screen, correct? That I am sharing?
I can see it.
Okay, excellent, great. Yeah, so today we're going to talk about thinking big, thinking really big, but starting and acting small. So all that through the biocultural preservation, through the empowerment of local champions. So thank you so much for being here today. I want to start us off here with a little bit of imagination. So I want to, for all of us, to imagine just for a moment that you are the only human in a 50-mile radius, in the middle of the Paraguay River. You can scream at the top of your lungs and no one will hear you. You're the only one there. I want you to imagine for a moment that you witness age-old ancestral knowledge, really old school, traditional knowledge that's been passed down from countless generations. And you're able to witness that and hear that and hear the stories of the elders of various communities. I want you to imagine for a moment that you find a home away from home, that amongst your travel, you are taken in as another son or daughter of a family. That's what I did in an expedition called Faces of the River. That's me in the boat. This was an expedition that was supported by World Wildlife Fund. And we'll talk a little bit about the expedition. We'll talk a little bit about the documentary that we carried out and my colleague and I created after the expedition. And we'll talk about some of the components there. And but essentially what we did was we rode down the Paraguay River. It took us 6 months. It was 1,300 kilometers long. So you can kind of see where we began up in Bahía Negra, Tres Gigantes. That's the northernmost part of the Paraguay River in Paraguay. And then we rode all the way down to Paso de Patria, Ñembucú, which is the southernmost port of Paraguay. And so it's 1,300 kilometers, 6 months long. And along the way, we were meeting tons of people carrying out World Wildlife Fund climate crowd methodology research. That's a bottom-up qualitative research through surveys and interviews that we're carrying out along the river. And we're carrying out educational workshops in local schools, along with the communications component as well. So really big picture, the expedition was the mission of the expedition was to empower local voices, bridging the gap between what happens at the policy level and what happens on the ground. As we know, a lot of times what happens is people who are feeling the effects of climate change or social challenges or economic challenges are the ones that aren't necessarily heard. And that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to empower those voices through social media, through the documentary, through hearing those stories and relaying those stories in the form of research, so that we can bridge the gap between what happens at the policy level and what happens on the ground. That photo on the top right is us. That's me and Henry, excuse me. So that's Henry, that's my project partner. We are camping along the river. We camped along the river. We carried just enough of beans, rice, dried soy meat. That was our only form of protein that we cooked along the way. And then we would, buy vegetables in small communities as we're going. And then in that bottom left-hand corner, that's actually a drone photo that we took. So we rode, there were some nights we rode in the middle of the night because the sun is just way too hot. Our original plan was to row, between the hours of maybe 4:30 a.m. to about, 11 a.m., try to get to our day's destination at that time. But what we realized was even at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, the sun is extremely hot. And that is, some of the research that we collected for World Wildlife Fund, some of the outcomes that we've heard along the way, that things are way hotter now. And weather patterns are more challenging to predict. But we'll get into some of that research. I'll try not to get too technical. But anyway, that photo was at nighttime. And it was trying to fly the drone because it was pitch black and they couldn't see anything. But yeah, so there we are. And that's actually not us in the boat in the bottom right. That was a photo we took, but it's a beautiful photo. So that Henry took that one. Oh, right. So a little bit about me. So my name is Jeff Wong. I'm so happy to be here. And thank you so much to Brett and Karina and Minerva and Manolo for pulling this together. I graduated from Georgetown University in 2016. I studied finance and accounting. But from there, I took a big career shift, I suppose, without even having started a career yet after graduation. I went to Paraguay. I came here to Paraguay for Peace Corps, Peace Corps service. I served in the community economic development sector. And during Peace Corps service, I really learned a lot about what the Paraguay River means to the people. It was so intrinsic to the daily life of the inhabitants along the Paraguay River. So if you kind of if I'll go back a couple slides, Paso de Patria, the destination of our expedition, is actually where I served in Peace Corps. So it was really cool that we were able to carry out the expedition, finishing in kind of like a coming to home party in a sense. But that's really the impetus for Faces of the River, and that's the expedition and the documentary that we carried out. We'll talk a little bit about Voices of the Chaco. It's another documentary that I'm currently working on, but that's I can't really talk too much about it. But it's about an Ayoreo man who he was the very first Ayoreo man to come in contact with the Western world. 1956. So it's a fascinating story. So hopefully you can get a link to that video in the future when we release that. I worked for 1 year in commercial consulting. This is just like general strategy consulting for a firm in DC. I did that for a year when I realized, I can't do this for my life. I want to get back on the ground. And so I'm actually working locally here in Paraguay now for a company in social impact investments. So it's weaving climate activism with the social impact component and weaving those together. And I recently started, so I'm really excited about that. But yeah, so that's a little bit about me. I don't want to go too fast. In case, Manolo, there was anybody that wanted to say, had any questions or anything, just make sure you stop me.
No problem. So far we're good with the questions. So
okay, cool.
Go ahead.
Cool. Well, oh yes. Okay, so here's I added a few photos so you can see. This is us. This is me. This is a lot of our stuff at the beginning of the expedition. You can see a ukulele in there. You got a guitar in there, but we were like way too tired when we were after a day's rowing to even think about whipping out the instruments. We got some boots, we have our life jackets, etc. We were all spick and span, ready to go. Okay, so Rostro del Rio, the expedition, we really started off this expedition and the documentary with three main objectives, mission objectives, which was to inspire, educate, and empower. We'll talk about each of those individually. First, to inspire. Why do we even do this trip? Why did we even do this trip? We knew that the Paraguay River is an economic, cultural, and an environmental powerhouse in Paraguay. It is extremely, extremely important to those three and all components of life. And what we found was, as we grow, as societies grow, as societies develop, we lose a connection with the connection that we have with our environment. I certainly have felt that growing up, being born and raised in the United States. I was born in the suburbs of Brookline, Massachusetts, right outside of Boston, Mass. My family all is in Northern Virginia, so hopefully we can get together sometime if everyone's in the area. But so what we wanted to do was inspire the audience, and you'll see it here. We wanted to evoke a personal connection with two adventurers, that's me and Henry, through the imagery and personal narration of a river expedition. What is the Pantanal? What is the Paraguay River? Why is it even important? Why should I care? Who are these two crazy dudes that are rowing down the river, and what are they doing there? Those are the kinds of the questions we wanted to start having people ask themselves, because only then, when you're interested, will you start to learn a little bit more. Oh, wow. 85% of Paraguay's exports go through the Paraguay River. That's a really interesting economic powerhouse of the country, etc. Those kinds of questions. Oh, extreme biodiversity lives in the Pantanal, the biggest wetlands in the world, home of Paraguay, Brazil, and Bolivia. They all share the Pantanal, right? Those are the kinds of questions that we wanted to evoke through the inspiration of Rostro del Rio. Faces of the River, excuse me. Spanish, English. Okay, that's us. We're arriving to the ports of Asuncion. It was supposed to be like a really easy 6-hour row. The sky just turned black on us, and we were rowing for 12 or 13 hours. We barely got to Asuncion before dusk. We were battling southern winds and heavy rains, and it was a battle out there. It was supposed to be an easy one. We were like, oh my gosh, we're about to get to Asuncion. Like, we'll get to rest a little bit in Asu before we continue on. But didn't work out that way. You can see this is already 2/3 through the trip, and we're already weather beaten and weather worn. So that's our trusty boat, Yepovuvu, which in Guarani means to explore, to adventure, to look for. And I was asking myself, what are we looking for? Not sure if I found the answer quite yet.
I have a question here, Jeff.
Yes.
Mary is asking what led you to join the Peace Corps right after college?
Yeah, great question, Mary. It was a big a career shift for me, because everyone was surprised in my family, and it took myself by surprise, if I'm being honest. But I had studied accounting and finance at the undergraduate business school at Georgetown, and I saw a lot of my friends, companions, schoolmates, everyone was getting themselves ready with an internship, after junior year, and if all things go well, they offer you a full-time job, and I couldn't see myself working a 9-to-5 in banking, consulting. That's kind of the pathway that I was on. Something in my heart, something in my soul was like, Jeff, there's something more out there. If you close your eyes for 1 second too long, you're going to wake up and you're 40. You're going to be like, where did it go? So just, think of something different. The Peace Corps came to my attention while I was at Georgetown. I think it was maybe senior year, I think, that I even found out, or maybe senior year, where the opportunity to travel abroad, to serve in a rural community, to learn a new culture, to learn a new language, that was very enticing for me. And so I made the leap. It was really tough for me and my family because it's a completely different life path, career path, and it was kind of a risk-taking decision, but that's what led me to join the Peace Corps. Paraguay specifically was was awarded to me, was given to me, gifted to me, I suppose. I don't know however you want to say it. Where you can, when you apply to the Peace Corps, you can put down preferences of where you might like to go, whether it be regional, country specific, continental, whatever, or anywhere in the world. I chose the sector of community economic development. I found that I felt like it was the closest to what I studied in school. And then I put Latin America. And so, yeah, I sent to Paraguay. Thanks for the question, Mary. So there's us in Asuncion, and we are arriving to the ports of Asuncion. Here is a little bit after Asuncion. We skipped all the good stuff in Asuncion, all the resting, sleeping in an actual bed, those kinds of things, getting like real meals. And here is a day where we actually lost our boat. We're about, I don't know,
Wow.
4/5 the way through the expedition, and we lost our boat. So that's, hopefully if we have time, I'll be able to tell the story of how we lost the boat. So that's the inspiration of the expedition, and what our first goal of Rostro del Rio was, to inspire, right? To inspire that personal connection. Our second goal of Rostro del Rio, Faces of the River, was to educate, provide the audience with relevant environmental, economic, and cultural information of the Paraguay River, of the Pantanal, of the social dynamic along the river, and so it was kind of two-pronged and sort of facing in two different directions. But we carried out, and this is Henry, this is one of the educational activities that we were carrying out this specific photo is an indigenous community of the Ishir Ubutoso people of the Pantanal. So we carried out educational workshops to them about the Pantanal, about the Paraguay River, but we are not, scientists or we didn't study science by trade. So really, it was actually a lot more collaborative with the students, and we wanted to learn from them. What is your relationship with the river? What kind of relationship of the river do you have with the river? What does the water mean to you? And it meant something different to every student, to every teacher, in every community, in every profession. And that was what was fascinating for us that we tried to highlight in our documentary. Hopefully you all were able to find a link to the doc and to slip through that. And so there was educate in terms of the educational workshops that we carried out along the river, but then there was educate through our social media, through the documentary, of some of those important, relevant information points about the Paraguay River. In terms of 80% of exports go through the Paraguay River. Cattle ranching cattle and soy are the biggest industries in Paraguay. Paraguay also at COP26 was named with the highest level of deforestation worldwide. I think this was in 2021, I think it's COP26, if I'm not mistaken. And those are things that we should sound the alarms of our head and say, wait a minute, what's going on here? And why is this important to me? And what are the implications to me? That's really what we tried to do, trying to spark inspiration so that you're thinking about it. Then you pose easily digestible information on the Paraguay River, on the Pantanal, on the deforestation, and then, here's another photo of one of the workshops that we did. So this first photo is in a small indigenous community of students, and this one ranged from I think like 7 years old to 12 or 13 years old. Those in the back are a little bit older. Maybe 14, 15. And then this was a group of other students that were a little bit older. These were university students. So then finally, you have inspired people to think about this, educate people to think about just big picture, of those components. And then finally, empower the local inhabitants along the river, share the inspirational stories and experience of local inhabitants and their dynamic relationship with the river, which is our way of empowering the local inhabitant, the local champion. Why is this? What is your relationship? What are some stories that you have to tell about what things are like now and how they have changed over the past, let's say 15 years, 20 years, 50 years, when my father was alive, back when my grandmother was alive? Those are the kinds of questions that we wanted to ask and tried to highlight those in our documentary. Just a couple of photos to share as well. This is part of the Voices of the Chaco project that I'm currently working on. these are a group of women who they go out every summertime to collect like little habaneros. They're specific to the Chaco region, the specific variety, and they go all out. But men and women. To that photo, just that day was just women, but they are the empowered. Well, I think of them as the strong women of the Ayoreo community, who go out and they collect the spices and they prepare them, and then that is like another form of income for them. And so those are kind of like the really creative ways that they're able to sustain their families, sustain their communities. And that's Pascualita. That was the mother that we were able to speak with and spend the day with that day. Here's another story that is one of those stories to highlight, let's say, to empower the local inhabitant. Here is Utokaidi. Utokaidi is the leader of the Ayoreo community that we had visited, and he's shaping sandals, wooden sandals made of Palo Santo. I'm not sure if Palo Santo what that is in English, what kind of wood that is, but Palo Santo is a very hardwood found in Paraguay, and it has an extremely aromatic, beautiful smell to it, and it has a ton of medicinal properties. Anyway, the traditional sandal in the Ayoreo community is actually rectangular, and so the Guaraníes here in Paraguay, they used to call the Ayoreos, the two indigenous communities, like the Guaraníes, the Ayoreos, they used to call them Putayovai, which in Guarani means I think it means like backwards feet, because when you saw the tracks in the forest, you couldn't tell which direction they were going. So they're harder to track, you know, when they're trying to look for different communities. So anyway, I thought that was a fascinating story. So I was able to get prepared for myself that I haven't quite figured out how to wear. Okay. And so this was Rostros del Rio. The first kind of open the door, inspire a question on, you know, what is this guy? What is this? What is the Paraguay River? Oh, it's important. How important? Why is it important? Etc. Then to educate, and I want to take that. I feel like it's a heavy word because it's not really what I was doing. It was more just like, or we Henry and I, we were more just providing big picture, just to get wrap your head around the immensity of the Paraguay River and the Pantanal for our audience. And then finally, now we have the doors, we open the door, we laid out some ground information, and then we empower the local inhabitants to share their stories. And that's what Rostro del Rio was, Faces of the River. It was really meant to bridge the gap between those policy, what happens, you know, at the policy level, and really what happens on the ground. And so we wanted to empower that local champion so that he and she can tell their story about what their life is like along the Paraguay River. Okay,
Jeff,
so this is going to be
Jeff.
Yeah,
To answer your question, Palo Santo is a tree that is from the same family of frankincense and myrrh, so it has medicinal properties, and it's also used for wood.
Excellent. Thank you, Hussein. Thank you, Manolo. We have Palo Santo. It's very it's a classic artisanal wood here in Paraguay. A lot of people really just have like little artisanal pieces of Palo Santo, but you know, the Ayoreo community, they actually taught me that you can add shavings of Palo Santo into your mate, into your tea, or I guess really just tea. And that also provides its own medicinal properties. So I do that a couple times a week nowadays. This photo is of me. I'm here. I'm there. We caught some fish, some piranha in the Paraguay River, and we were cooking it over some fire that we made along the coast. And there I am. We actually made like a little. How do you say guiso in English? Basically like a stir fried, right? Yeah, thank you. Yes, we made like a stew because that was like one little bony fish, and I was still so hungry after, so we made some stew. After rowing 12 hours, and you know, it got kind of hungry. So I don't want to bog us down too much, but I did want to talk a little bit about our findings from the research that we carried out for World Wildlife Fund. So along the Paraguay River, we were carrying out bottom-up qualitative research for World Wildlife Fund. We were using the methodology called climate crowd. And these are some of the findings. So climate crowd is where you go to a community, you carry out interviews, surveys, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to figure out what are the impacts that have been felt in this community from climate change, and what are you doing to combat that, or how are you trying to work through that? So the classic example that Nikhil Advani, director of Climate Crowd at World Wildlife Fund, gives is that, like, let's say, somebody will in an interview will say, oh, like, we can't find enough firewood to be able to cook because of all the deforestation around our neighborhood. Let's just say, right? That's the example. And then that would be something that would be an outcome that they have cited. And then maybe the next question would be like, okay, so what are you doing about the firewood? And so then your participant in this interview may say something like, well, we have to trespass into a neighboring private property to get firewood, in the nighttime. That could be, something that somebody would say. And so that would be one of the negative consequences of, let's say, climate change. So some of the outcomes that we found during our research during the Paraguay River expedition was definitely an increased heat. I think we had 100% of respondents said that increased heat was the number one change that they felt in recent years. Decreased predictability of weather patterns. Sometimes it looks like it's going to rain, but it don't rain. Sometimes it doesn't look like it's going to rain, but then there's a torrential downpour. So there's a decreased predictability of weather patterns. And then lastly, there's an impact on the local economy. Some fishermen have cited that the fish nowadays are smaller. There are less frequent, they're less in quantity. I know Manolo and I were just talking about this the other day, that's kind of the story, right? Back in my day, we used to pull out fish that were this big, 80 kilos huge, and that I pulled it out with my father, but now the fish are a lot smaller and a lot less in that quantity. And then so that's the fishing story. And then the artisanry story is how the artisans in the indigenous communities that we visited, they can't find the materials necessary. Because of the recent drought in Paraguay in the past 3 years, I know that's a little bit too short of a timeline, but the past 3 years, the carawata, which is a type of cactus that they use for their artisanry, they can't find it anymore. It's because there hasn't been enough rain. So that impacts the local economy, that impacts those local groups. So those are some of the outcomes that we heard carrying out our research for World Wildlife Fund. And some of the cited attributions. So why do you think that this is happening? Some of the things that we heard from the participants that we were speaking to was actually, very interestingly, a decreased spiritual connection to the environment. That one we heard, and I was like, it blew my socks off. I think that coming from this, coming from the climate conversation, I think of specifically deforestation. I may think of contamination or greenhouse gas emissions, let's say, and the answer really just blew me away. Decreased spiritual connection to the environment, and I think that that's true. Actually, I'm a convert, let's say. I think that we have lost a little bit of our connection with our surroundings, and that connection with Mother Nature, that Pachamama. Local deforestation was also cited as an attribution. I think as I mentioned before, in COP26, Paraguay was rated with the highest levels of deforestation in the world, and so of course there's going to be local and not so local, all in Paraguay deforestation. That's going to be an issue. However, I do have some interesting stories about that. And then lastly, the construction of infrastructure that changes the local environment as well. So this research, we collected this research back in 2019, and the way Climate Crowd works is usually you will go to a community, carry out Climate Crowd research, analyze the data, present the data back to the community, and then work with the community to build local projects to combat the impacts that you have felt, that the community has felt from climate change. Unfortunately for us, when COVID came, sort of all plans got scrapped, and so I'm not sure the status of our current of our research, but I'm not involved as it stands today. So that's our Climate Crowd research findings. So please, if you have any questions or comments, do not hesitate to throw them into the Q&A. Okay, so what? This is the same evening of the earlier photo of when you saw those two piranhas. It's a slightly better photo that you can kind of see. Yep, those were small piranhas. I was trying to stoke the fire in order for the piranhas to cook. We didn't have any salt, we didn't have pepper, we didn't have anything to put on it. So it was just pure fish, and it was good fish. It just, was really bony. So what? What do we do to stoke the fire of a growing understanding or consciousness awareness about the climate impacts here? I'll leave you with a few, three, and of what I've found. What do we do now? I find that on a really small level, I'm thinking about, like, what do we actually do? What can I do today? Reconnect with the environment around us, learn about the environment around us. That means getting outside a little bit, going for a walk. And I know I'm sort of preaching to the choir here. That's why we're all here. We're getting involved. I still find that to be true. Reconnect with the environment around us. With this picture here, I went fishing up with the park rangers of Tres Gigantes when we began the expedition, and I caught a pacu. That is a pacu. It's a I don't know how you would say them in English, but that's how you call it in I guess it's a Guarani name, pacu. I don't know, Spanish name.
Yeah, it's the same name. It retains the name in English.
Oh, how that's convenient.
Pacu,
Thank you, man.
yes, pacu.
Oh, great. Well, that's a pacu that I caught, and we ate that for dinner. We had fish stew that night. And what I learned was the mangroves on the side of the river create areas of habitat for the fish, such as pacu. And then you have caranda palm trees that have little cocos. Caranda the little cocos will fall into the water, and the pacu will eat the caranda. And then you'll have the yacare, the caiman, will come and eat the pacu, and then you'll have the giant river otter or the jaguar will come eat the yaguarete. So then you have this, I'm learning about all the circular, I guess we all know that. I guess I'm preaching to the choir again, the circular relationship nature of nature. And I'm getting that hands-on experience. So that's the first thing. What can we do here? Reconnect with the environment around us. And that is, getting a house plant, planting it in your yard. I was telling Manolo that I am planting like fruit trees all over the place. I'm starting to grow my own food, and it's kind of like my next stage in the evolution here. Another one is reconnect with traditional culture and the values of our parents and grandparents. I think that we as young people, we're young, we're dumb, but we're full of energy and excitement, and we want to change the world and blaze a new path. And my parents, they're old school. They don't really get it. Things have changed now, Mom, like Dad, like things have changed now. And what I've learned as I've gotten a little bit older, I'm 30, I guess. So I guess for that perspective is that we need to be thoughtful of what the traditions and values are of our parents and grandparents on a literal familial level. That's for me and for you, let's just say, but also at the societal community culture level. What are the values that are being taught in the indigenous communities? What kinds of traditions and taboos or stories are being passed down in these indigenous communities, and how do we not lose those? In 1.5 generations, you can lose a culture, a community full stories, you can lose them all in 1.5 generations. And so that's part of the work that I've carried out, with Faces of the River and Voices of the Chaco, trying to highlight hearing those stories and creating an academic registry of those kinds of stories. And then lastly, for me, climate change is a monster issue. It's literally a global issue, climate change. So what can we do about it? I used to get overwhelmed by climate change because of how big it was, how big it felt. Like, oh my gosh, how can I do something about climate change? I'm just one little guy. What I learned through Ayoreo, being on the Paraguay River, meeting the local champions of their communities, I learned that you can make real change by starting local, by volunteering, getting involved at your local NGO, right up the street, or a local youth group or community group, anything, getting involved and making action. And what I found is that there's a lot of thinkers, there's a lot of planners, but what we're missing in this world are the doers, the ones that will actually go out and do. Again, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir. What are we doing here? That's why we're all here, right? So those are kind of the three things that I've learned over the course of my time here in Paraguay. Learn about the environment around us. Get out there. Go fishing for the pacu. Learn about the caranda. Reconnect with our grandparents. Unfortunately, my parents have already passed away, so I can't ask them. But in this photo, Gabriela, that's her in the photo, and she's showing me the spices that she had just what do you call that when you machacar?
Ground.
Yeah. Thank you, Manolo. When she was grinding the spices, and she was saying to me, if I could, I would go back and ask my father more questions about our own culture, where I came from, where our community came from, what things were like, because he would never stop. He would never shut up about culture, but I never got enough. That's what she said to me. I thought, we in this Occidental Western world mindset, we are the young person. We are the bringing about the change. We're bringing about paving new paths. We have to slow down, talk to our elders. In this case, I'm kind of making that metaphor that, my grandparents are akin to our society, the indigenous communities, learning about those values. And then lastly, getting involved with our local chapters, our local groups. And that's what I have for you today. So thank you so much for the time. Thank you for listening. I would like to open it up to any other questions or comments about Faces of the River, the expedition, the documentary, the Voices of the Chaco, or anything at all. So yeah, thank you so much.
We have tons of questions here, Jeff.
Oh, excellent.
The first one is from Shmuel, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. I met him yesterday at the meeting that we had to open the conference, and he says, "What's the role of local communities in resolution of social problems and improvement of social and economic well-being of poor and low socioeconomic groups of populations in Paraguay?" That's quite a huge question and very important, I think.
Excellent question, and there's no short answer, and I'm not going to do it justice. So I'll just preface it with that. What I've found is, and this is true with many governments, and I'm not criticizing the Paraguayan government, but there's a lot to do in Paraguay, and there's a lot missing in Paraguay for many rural, let's say, lower socioeconomic level communities. And that individual needs to get out there and needs to go for it. For example, let me actually pull this back up, but I'll actually, this is just in my, let's see, this is just in my appendix here. I came prepared, Shmuel. So good question. So this is Deremy. This is one of the guys that we highlight in our documentary. He's carrying out urban reforestation in his community. He realized that the elderly and the infants cannot go outside in the middle of the day because it's way too hot in the summertime. He realized that, and so he thought, why is that? Oh, there's no shade because of the new infrastructure that was recently built. There's no trees. So why don't we plant some trees? And he's the one that said it to me. And I know it's a classic phrase, but he said it to me in this context here. And he said, I may not sit under the shade of the tree, but I know my kids will. I know that the kids of the pueblo will. And so he took matters into his own hands. So he started his group, Las Hormiguitas, which in Spanish means the little ants. And I thought it was very fitting. And that's why we highlighted them in the film, is because he's not worried about, well, he is worried about big picture climate change, but he makes these actions in the little ants way. He goes, every day we just go to work. We just go to work. We plant the trees, and he's been since monitoring and watering the plants every day for 3 years. You know, we highlighted in 2021. Here we are in 2023. Now the trees are a lot bigger. And I asked him, I recently caught up with Deremy. I was like, so how are the trees doing? And he's like, they're amazing. You know, he didn't have a 100% germination rate or take rate into the ground, but it's something like really high. It's like 70-80% of all the trees survived, and they're like, you know, maybe 2 meters tall now. And I'm like, that's amazing. Native trees that he went out there and he did something about it. So local NGO, another bigger domestic, you know, Paraguayan NGO supported Las Hormiguitas, this youth group in Villa del Rosario along the Paraguay River, and that's, you know, I found that a lot of people are willing to jump in to help, but we're all kind of waiting for the first guy to, you know, do something. So that's kind of Derely's, and that's what I think is the role of the community, the role of the individual. You see a problem or see a challenge, and instead of thinking, oh, okay, like it's way too hot, the world's gonna end, we're all gonna melt here, he thought to himself, why don't we plant some damn trees? And I loved it. So thank you, Shmuel, for the question.
Yes, the next question I have here is, what is your favorite volunteering experience in the Peace Corps?
Oh my, that's a tough question too, and I'm not going to do that justice either. I taught futsal, which is soccer, but it's on the size of a basketball court. So it's football cinco. So you have 4 players and a goalie. So it's a lot smaller, and it's the ball is small. I was a coach. I never played soccer in my life. You know, like played sports growing up and whatever. So I was able to pick some stuff up, but and the students. So this was relevant to my work in Peace Corps because it was all like capacity building, teamwork, leadership. Those are kind of the base level foundational components you need in order to, you know, build a business, let's say, or enter the workforce, you know, being a productive member of society, right? In that way, having that filling in your civic responsibility. And so anyway, as I was teaching this futsal to these kids, they're like U13 girls, U17 girls and boys. So U13 boys and girls, and then U17 boys and girls. So 4 teams. And I remember that we went to the annual tournament in a small town nearby. It's a small town, it's the biggest town nearby. And they filled like this coliseum with like, I don't know, 1,000 people or something. And the place was loud. And in Paraguay, everyone brings the school band. So everyone got like those big tambores where they're like banging on them. And so I couldn't hear anything, and everyone's yelling around me in Guarani. That's the second official language. And I was trying to give a pep talk to these U13 girls. They're all like 11 and 12 years old. And I was like, this is what we worked for. This is what we trained for. And they're all like crying in the huddle. And I was like, so that was amazing. Thinking about, I'm getting a little choked up about it, thinking about it. We ended up winning that game amazingly. It was like against all odds. And then we lost in the semifinals. So that was how that went. That was probably my favorite, teaching futsal to U13 girls team of the local high school. Thank you for the question.
We're running out of time here, and you'll probably answer these questions directly to the people that are asking them. But I have a question that I thought could wrap everything up.
Okay.
To finish the presentation today, and is, how did this experience change you? as a person?
I was going to say which experience, but I suppose the question is asking all of them or any of them.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess your experiences in Paraguay.
Well, it is my life now. Without the experience in Paraguay, it's not, I think if I would have changed, it would have just been a different life at this point. I've been now here in Paraguay since 2017, when I came as a Peace Corps volunteer. So I've been here for 6 years, which is, that means I came when I was 24, and I'm 30 now. So that's a lot of years. I've had incredible experiences learning about the Paraguayan culture, the South American history, culture, a new language in Spanish, mastering my Spanish.
You're forgetting your English even.
Yeah, exactly. Let's forget my English.
You're becoming a local. You're becoming a local.
Yeah, right. It's like a jack of many languages, master of none. I don't even have English anymore. And learning Guarani. So that's the and I guess I never mentioned it, but Guarani is the second official language of Paraguay. 70% of Paraguayans speak both Spanish and Guarani, and most prefer speaking Guarani, the indigenous language. So if you ever wanted to understand Paraguay on a truly spiritual or intimate level, you have to know Guarani. So I did a deep dive in Guarani. I'm conversationally fluent now in Guarani. Having the perspective here, and I think this is true traveling anywhere, whether it be Paraguay or other. The minute you travel and you dive into a new culture, you are privy to the new culture, and at the same time you are able to look from a third person perspective at American culture to see, and you can see, I was born and raised in the U.S. I never really did too much traveling outside the U.S. A couple of trips to Korea to visit family, but that was about it. You're able to look with a much more critical eye at American culture, American practices at the same time, to be able to, kind of just have that perspective. I feel much more understanding of various cultures as well, that there is no such thing as better, worse. It's just different. It's just a culture that I may not have understood yet. Not that I, was like, felt like that before coming to Paraguay, but it's definitely been something that's been ingrained into me in terms of my relationships in international relations, working with, multinational NGOs, local NGOs, multinational philanthropic organizations, smaller organizations here in Paraguay, and everything in between. So it's not that Paraguay has shaped me. It is that it is a completely different me. So hopefully that answers the question. And anyway, thank you so much, everybody, for having me here today. I've had a wonderful time, and please enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you so much.
Yes, and thank you for being here and telling us about all these great experiences you had.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Citizens Climate Lobby's training program. You can tune into more episodes anywhere podcasts are available. Inspired by what you heard today? Join Citizens Climate Lobby to advocate for bipartisan climate solutions. Go to community.citizensclimate.org to find more trainings, resources, your local chapter, national action teams, discussion forums, and more. Be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @CitizensClimate. We also invite all of our listeners to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiration.
Like what you hear? Recommend us to your friends and make sure to give us a 5-star rating. It helps us show up on other listeners' feeds. Feel free to pass on any suggestions for future episodes in the comments as well.
And together, we are creating the political will for a livable world.